Okay, try to guess where this is from. Even before birth, all human beings bear the image of God, and their lives cannot be destroyed without effacing his glory. If you guessed the Bible, you guessed wrong. That statement was written last week by Alabama State Supreme Court Chief Justice Tom Parker. It was part of his concurring opinion, ruling that the frozen embryos of IVF patients should be considered children, and disposing of one can be considered a wrongful death. That decision has sparked confusion and outrage and panic among people who really want to be parents and might need the help of in vitro fertilization to become ones. And not just in Alabama. Liberty Counsel, a conservative Christian litigation group, has asked the Florida Supreme Court to consider Alabama's IVF decision before ruling on a pending ballot measure that would codify abortion access in Florida. And it seems like the Liberty Counsel might have a supporter on the Florida bench. In a hearing earlier this month, Florida Chief Justice Carlos Muniz floated the idea of fetal personhood, noting that the court hasn't yet taken a position on whether the state's constitution protects an unborn child at any stage of pregnancy. Joining me now is Erin Carmone, senior correspondent at New York Magazine and co-author of Notorious RBG, The Life and Times of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Erin, thank you for being here tonight and helping me make sense of this. I mean, do you think what we're witnessing in real time here is potentially the death knell of IVF in red states across America, much like abortion access?
It certainly looks like it's headed that way in Alabama. But, I want to step back for a second. In 2011, I went to Mississippi to cover a personhood ballot measure in one of the most conservative states, very similar to Alabama. It failed because people pointed out that fetal personhood would naturally lead to restricting IVF. And there were enough people in the state who rebelled against that and voted against it. But Alabama has been on this track to embrace fetal personhood from the beginning. And they did it in ways that did not immediately capture attention the way upper middle class people who can afford IVF, who want to be parents, can. So they first started prosecuting pregnant people who use drugs. The Alabama State Supreme Court said more than 10 years ago that you could charge pregnant people with chemical endangerment and that fetuses were children for the purposes of that law. They separately also said, even before Roe v. Wade, that Alabama's constitution protected fetuses and embryos as persons. So there's some incoherence here. There was also this state lawmaker in Alabama who said when one of the abortion bans was being debated, he said, no, this doesn't cover the embryo in the lab because it's not inside a woman. Right. So there's still some part of the movement that hasn't quite figured out what it wants to do with respect to IVF, which is enormously popular. It helps people build their family regardless of circumstance. But it seems like the wing that is ascendant right now is the absolutist. You mentioned this deeply religious language in the concurrence, this fetal personhood above all that once was considered marginal has become extremely powerful. And so when it was people who use drugs, or Alabama even had somebody, even appointed a lawyer for a fetus when a teen was seeking a judicial bypass for an abortion. So when it was the abortion patient, when it was the drug user, then it was the woman who had the miscarriage. Now it's the woman who would, or the family that would like to have more children. It is really a question fundamentally of reproductive control that is affecting people in all different circumstances and decisions of pregnancy.
Yeah, well, and I would assume that reality of who this affects, first of all, people that actively want to have children, right, which is not necessarily the case when you're talking about abortion, but this is all people who want to procreate. Many of them are wealthy, and I'm sure plenty of them are Republicans. Some of them are not wealthy. But the fact is, when you talk about constituencies, I'm having a hard time understanding how this is. I'm setting aside the morals and ethics here for a moment, but just politically, like how this is advantageous for conservatives to run on.
Well, it's not unheard of for states to restrict IVF. It was done in Italy. It was done in Poland under different governments. It's not popular. It didn't last, but it is theoretically possible for this to happen. I think it just needs to be seen in the context of, even though it is fundamentally irrational, some people have said it's ironic, it's irrational. They are willing to go this far to enshrine into law. They're willing to even prevent babies from being born. In order to prove a point, ultimately a religious point about the value of a frozen embryo being above the desires of living people on this earth.
Erin, I think according to the Washington Post, at least 11 states have broadly defined personhood beginning at fertilization. And those states include, I believe, Alabama, Mississippi, Oklahoma, and South Carolina. I mean, do you see what's happening in Alabama as a usable template for other states that want to aggressively pursue fetal personhood amendments?
They certainly would like that to be the case. But Alex, I mean, you and I have talked before about how deeply unpopular now, in a way that I think even pro-choice advocates are surprised by how deeply unpopular restricting abortion has been in these states. So I do think, I mean, all day I've been getting freaking out text messages from people that I don't usually hear from, like, is this for real? Is this going to stand? It gets people's attention. I think you're right about the politics of this. I think it's a great moment to look at all of the interconnections here between people who are seeing their reproductive freedom restricted, regardless of what kind of outcome they want for their pregnancy. So I do think, even though IVF is unfortunately not available, not accessible, not affordable to everybody who would like to use it to treat infertility, I do think it commands people's attention in a way that has begun to happen with other things, but hadn't before Roe v. Wade was overturned.
It's just the absolute chaos of the post-Dobbs decision, really, in evidence today as we read the headlines in the newspaper. Erin Carmon, thank you so much for your essential reporting on all of this, Erin. It's great to have you on the show tonight.
Thank you.